forgetting that the reason Uni Posca paint markers are so popular today is because in the early 80s, it was the graffiti community that started using these and helped the brand Posca gain notoriety. And as more art communities discovered these superbly designed paint markers, they found more applications for all of them, including the PC-8K chisel tip marker that we're going to be doing a full surface test with here today. But there's one problem with everybody using these Posca markers, and here's what it is. Now, graffiti writers have been using paint markers almost since the very beginning days of graffiti, when there were only some more sort of industrial options available that could be adapted as sort of paint markers. Now, some other artists have found useful ways to use Posca paint markers and integrate them into their own craft. But the problem with the more recent popularization of Posca's paint markers is that most of these new artists who are using these paint markers do not know how to use paint markers, nor do they really have any business using them in the first place.
Okay, let's see. It's not working!
And we'll be looking at exactly how the Posca 8mm chisel tip marker works and how it performs in a full surface tagging test. But this trend has resulted in a lot of large influencers buying these as sort of the trendy new item that'll turn heads on their social media pages. And it's because of that that more and more people are trying these beautifully designed paint markers on the wrong surfaces and in the wrong ways. After all, these are water-based paint markers. You wouldn't try using a brush and some paint on a piece of paper in your sketchbook, so why would you try using these on a piece of paper in your sketchbook? And don't get me wrong, I think it's great that a lot of artists have found great ways to use these to add layers to their work and make it legitimately better. But today we're looking specifically at the 8mm chisel tip marker, the PC-8K as it's called, while we do a full surface tagging test with this marker to see how it performs on different surfaces, while I explain to you why there's really only one way you should be using this marker. Now, what you're seeing here as we start tagging up names of those who are in our Patreon crew and subscribers who are supporting the channel is the unique effect that you can get with chisel tip markers. And that's really important. It's important because chisel tip markers were originally designed for calligraphy, not for filling in stuff on a piece of paper. I simply cannot support such a beautifully designed marker just being used to fill stuff in. And the Posca 8mm chisel tip here being designed with calligraphy in mind is important. Again, because a lot of how graffiti developed has roots in calligraphic writing and other font work like that. And as we tag these names up, take a look at how calligraphy plays a role in these different hand styles. As a graffiti writer or a graffiti artist, it's really important to understand that, and you'll get way more out of an awesome marker like this Posca PC-8K if you're using it the way it's supposed to be used / what it was designed for. Now, just in case any of you have a bit of a problem with me just picking a fight with people who use this to fill in large areas, I will actually say this comes in 33 colors, but the red in particular, I tried red because it's a nice sort of in the middle primary color. The red was really dull. So just making a consistent sheen of paint might be a little bit hard with this water-based paint. And you know, we did find there were significant differences in the water-based paint formula when we tested out the Posca Mop Rs as well. So as great as the physical markers are from Posca, they seem to have a bit of trouble with their pigmentation. But if we're talking about the actual marker, we started off tagging on a smooth finished polyplastic. The nib feels great. One thing that's a little bit unique about this marker, besides the overall size, it's very small. is that the nib actually only compresses a very, very small amount. Usually with 8mm chisel tip nibs, you can compress the nib maybe a half a centimeter or a little bit more to activate the valve system. Whereas with this Posca chisel tip marker, you're really probably only compressing the nib about, I'd say, a quarter of a centimeter for the valve actuation process. The nib itself feels really, really nice to use. It's solid, but not so solid that it feels like it's taking away the spongy feel of a nib. It's that nice in between. Stood up really well so far. On the wood, it was a finished wood, but you still could feel a little bit more drag as you make lines with the Posca marker. And to me, that shows that the nib is just a little bit softer, which in my opinion, that's great. I love to feel the surface I'm writing on as I do a tag. The flow and the valve system are very, very responsive. You can get a great consistent flow with this marker, and the nib continually spits out paint for you just fine. In terms of chisel tip markers, this nib is pretty benign. It's 8mm on the long ways and probably about 4 on the short ways, so you're not getting the sharpest cuts if you use this for sort of calligraphy style fonts, but it's definitely a good chisel tip to get those chisel tip effects that make a lot of tags look really, really on point. As I mentioned before, the paint quality is good in that, you know, it flows through the marker and works fine in the marker that it's designed to be used in. That being said, as soon as we started tagging over part of that polyplastic that had some grime on it with that Dillinger tag, you can see it's just hard to read, and that really exposes the transparency here in this written paint formula. Even furthermore than that, as soon as we started tagging on glass, that's a glass with a dark tint on it, and even just that dark tint seems to be enough to really expose just how streaky the formula is, and because of that, it's transparent enough that it's a little bit harder to read some of those tags. Although you're always going to have a thinner sort of line on glass because it's such a slippery surface, it is disappointing to see the extent to which this formula doesn't seem to be totally opaque. But in terms of actually tagging with this itself, it's a very nice pocket-sized marker, very comfortable to actually write with and to use. I tried using a little bit on flat as well as vertical surfaces. Both feel really, really nice to me. It's almost short enough that if you like holding your markers like this, sort of like some people hold squeeze mops, you can do that. It doesn't feel like you have super good control as if the nib was right at the end of your fingertips if this was 3 inches shorter, but this kind of grip can give you those nice wispy lines if you're looking for that. So overall, this is a really well designed marker that's a unique shape and size, which makes it great for carryability. It's definitely worth picking up and getting a feel for yourself to try out, I would say. They're actually only about $5 each as well, which is nice. I put a link in the description to a pack of different color ones you can get if you did want to try them out. I'm happy that this marker was designed well overall because we recently did a review again of the mop we mentioned earlier, the Posca Mop R, which is the first mop that Posca has tried to make, and the design on it was a little bit different. If you want to see what I mean by that, check out the video on screen right now. We did a full performance test of their newest mop in that video, and it definitely turned out a lot different than I thought. I'll catch you over there. Peace.